Hey everybody, welcome back to Terminus, the Betrayal at House on the Hill of the Extreme Metal podcasts, and additionally, because I forgot to do one last episode, I'm surprised you didn't call me on it, also the Tokyo Mew Mew of Extreme Metal podcasts. I am the death metal guy, aka manga adaptation of the story of thrash metal band NME.
I would read that. Fuck out of that.
I would too. Holy shit, man.
And I am the black metal guy, aka social distancing Raziel from Soul Reaver, Legacy of Kain.
I mean, he already is. He's already got his mask, right?
Exactly, yeah.
You know, I actually never played, I never played the Soul Reaver games. I actually played Blood Omen, the first Legacy of Kain, the really old one, and the later one they did in the early 2000s, but I never played the Soul Reaver ones, which I heard were, like, the really good ones.
I did not. I only had a shitty PS1 at the time that these were out, so all I could do was play the original Soul Reaver on my on that, which I wished had a higher ratio of killing vampires to solving dumb puzzles.
I do remember thinking that Raziel was the coolest name in the world.
Raziel was fucking cool. There were moves you could do where you could, like, jump on a guy, like, with your fucking vampire claw feet on the hips and then pull the torso off.
Oh, nice.
Shit was pretty lit. And I think obviously inspired by black metal and probably a understated inspiration to Dark Souls shit.
Oh, definitely. And, well, there was a whole lineage of cool, edgy PS1 games, like, Soul Reaver Shadow Man was a really cool, edgy PS1 game. And then, actually, the woman who wrote the story for Soul Reaver went on to become, like, a super major writer in video games. I think she actually ended up writing, like, the first Last of Us, or, like, some of the Uncharted games or something. So she's really cool, actually.
All my friends at the time had, all my friends at the time had, like, PS2s or whatever was out there.
Okay.
And so I could play, like, the Blood Omen or the later Soul Reavers there, and those were way fucking cooler. I was like, Mom, Dad, why can't I get a better PlayStation?
Well, you're a crypto gamer at heart, you know?
Exactly. No, I've always kept, aside from a brief period of trying to be cool, I've always kept up with it, but never gone all the way.
Okay. All right, so we're back with episode 20, boys. We got to episode goddamn 20. We should have fallen apart long before this, but here we are, stronger than ever.
Yes, I mean, this is pretty cool. I mean, how many podcasts do you think we've outlasted?
Probably 90% of them. Most of them do, like, 2 episodes and then fall apart.
Yeah.
But our black metal, werewolf overlord powers allow us to continue. So,
Yes.
real quick housekeeping up front. So as we've said before, if you like this content and you want to hear more in the forms of our bonus episodes, aka Terminus Prime, you can subscribe to us on Subscribestar if you're a real weirdo, or Patreon, where most people are subscribing.
Everyone's on Patreon right now.
Everyone's on Patreon. Yeah. It's actually been going pretty well. We've gotten, like, a few new subscribers just in the past week, so, shouts out to them. Thanks.
We have 5 total patrons. Yeah, thank you everyone who joined. I don't know if we've got, like, a regular procedure on shouting people out or not, because some of them are under their real names, but thank you, Patreon patrons.
Yeah, and now you've got a real good reason to subscribe, because if you donate $5 or up, I hate saying donate, it's not a donation, you're purchasing
Yeah, that's
content,
true.
Yeah,
and you're our patron. You wouldn't call fucking, you wouldn't call the Medicis, donors to Michelangelo.
Right? Subscribers to Michelangelo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hey, it's me, Michelangelo. Thanks, Pope Pius the whatever, for just donating. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for slamming that subscribe button.
Yeah, everyone remember to like and sub.
But now if you're donating, you got a great reason to. We have our official Discord up, so if you donate at the $5 tier or more, Black Metal Hermit or more, so to speak, you get access to our private Discord, where we're hanging out, shit posting about the Uncharted games and talking about bad thrash metal. We just got that up. We're having a good time in there, so definitely join up. And if you don't want to socially participate, that's fine. We've got a $3 tier where you can just get the bonus episodes and be a hermit on your own. So that's okay. Additionally, the usual, like, comment, subscribe wherever you're listening to this. We're now on, what are we now on? Amazon Music or something?
Oh, yeah, they told us we got added to Amazon Music, so we are directly supporting Jeff Bezos now, which is something I've always dreamed of.
Oh, yeah, thank God. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
I did briefly work for a couple months in an Amazon facility. It was one of the worst jobs I've ever had.
Yeah, you basically, I was like, oh, bro, I've heard those are awful, and you were like, yes.
I mean, it sucks, not like massively more than any other shitty job I've had, but it does suck though. But yeah, so obviously wherever you're listening to us, be that I think a lot of people are just listening on YouTube, but any of the various podcast networks, Podbean, Spotify, we're on, Podcast Addict, whatever. Leave us a review.
Podcasts.
Apple Podcasts.
Oh yeah, we've got some reviews on Apple Podcasts, and we forgot to plug for that before. So yeah, if you listen to us on the Apple Podcast thing on your phone or whatever, you could rate us however much you think we deserve and leave a review.
Oh, and be sure to include in your review, if you listen to this, who do you think is the better sex haver, the black metal guy or the death metal guy? You know, that's how we'll know that you're very serious about this. And additionally, if you haven't yet, we now have a social media presence. We're on Facebook at Terminus Podcast and on Instagram at Terminus Extreme Metal.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, cool. So at Terminus Extreme Metal on IG, I run the Facebook, and the black metal guy handles the IG. So you've got two very, very different sorts of interaction available there.
Yeah. So, and now I thought of a gimmick for the beginning of the show, which was
I saw. God damn
I mean,
it.
everybody's been memeing this all week, so we may as well do it, right? I mean, what is a podcast if not something that rides trends to viral viewing?
Okay, and so what have we...
We've got...
for the listeners, what do we got?
This is Zodiac by 6 Feet Under. So I think we want to do this as a reaction sort of thing. Will you be able to drop the video, the audio under our talking, or should we pause it?
Oh, no, I can drop it under us talking, because this is...
Yeah, we'll listen to it at low volume.
I haven't heard it, but I know this is going to be terrible.
This is going to make you feel like... You're going to be glad you heard it, but it's going to also make you feel like... It'll feel like an awful burrito you ate yesterday. You'll be sort of glad you ate it, but you'll really hate yourself.
All right, count us in, black metal guy.
All right, hang on. 3, 2, 1, suck.
Immediately terrible.
Already awful. Already sounds like it's Seek and Destroy by Metallica, right?
But like slowed way down, I guess.
Is 6 Feet Under supposed to be a death metal band?
I don't know, because I literally have never met anyone who likes 6 Feet Under.
It's like sub-obituary, right? It's like between Disturbed and Obituary, I think is the thing.
At this point, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean... Oh my god. Dude, this isn't even like... What the fuck? Chris.
Yeah.
Chris, hang it up.
What's his name?
Chris Barnes. He was the original vocalist for Cannibal Corpse. God.
Jesus Christ. Do you think he's doing...
Oh no.
I love the idea of writing for a fucking, radio hook riff, and like, that's the worst part of the song by far.
This doesn't even, like... There's no way these guys were writing these songs and were like, oh, this is fucking sick, man, this is cool.
Do you think... I'm honestly a little concerned for them, because this sounds like if you made something like this, you might engage in self-harm afterward.
Well, I like how... Could this be the final end of 6 Feet Under? Because I turned off comments on the YouTube video.
Oh yeah, no, this got ratio. We're at 2.3k downvotes to 1.4k upvotes.
That's the thing, though. I've never met anyone who likes this fucking band.
Frustration. This is so bad.
What the fuck? Oh my god, dude.
He's gonna keep repeating it.
Dude, this wouldn't pass as a demo from, like, a band in Kansas, you know?
I mean, there are... And now a blues solo.
Are they just coasting off momentum? But what momentum? Nobody ever liked this fucking band.
Could you even describe this as... I think the thing that really gets me is that this seems very intentional. You would have to try to write something this bad.
Oh, it's over. Oh. It's so... I don't even know where the fuck to start, man. Like, it's just... It's upsetting.
How would you
like
describe how it's written? It's like... half thrash?
It's like... It feels written arbitrarily. It feels like... they wrote it in, like, Guitar Pro, and they, like, didn't listen to it. It's just like, I know these chords basically work, and this is the song. And then they went into the studio and recorded it, and Chris smoked a bunch of weed and wrote some shitty lyrics, and just kind of, like, he can't fucking do vocals anymore. His voice is so shot, it's unbelievable.
God, it's awful. Yeah, it sounds like somebody's first... It doesn't sound like a veteran, even. It sounds like somebody's first attempt at it. You know what I mean?
Except people who attempt it first are usually... There's some, like, youthful energy there. This is tired sounding. I've never heard... This is exhausting to listen to. I can't even, like, riff on it and joke about it, because it's just, like, sad. And kind of pathetic.
It really is sad. It's a little bit like... You know, it's how do I... It's like seeing a very, very old man being forced to campaign for a very, very important office. It's a little bit sad.
And he's clearly sundowning during it and shit.
Yeah, I mean, this has that quality of, like, please don't make Chris Barnes record this.
I want to see Chris Barnes draw a clock face and see what happens. Oh God, Jesus. Oh God. So that was...
It made the death metal... It's so bad it made the death metal guy cough.
Oh God, dude. All right, that was great. I'm glad we did that. So, let's talk about the actual good records that we have today to talk about. So we've got a good block of stuff, and you've got the first two today. So what are we doing?
All right, so I think for this show we're at extreme black metal guy and extreme death metal guy.
Yeah,
we've
definitely.
got half Slavic black metal and half sort of gruesome death metal.
Yeah.
So yeah. First off is a favorite of mine who suddenly put out a new record the other day, and I was like, "Stop the presses! We got to review this." So this is Slavland's new one, and you're good at pronouncing Polish, I think. Can you do this?
I mean, it's basically just Stal, Biała, Czerwona, something like that.
Sure, yeah, sir, Czerwona, I've heard. It just sounds... What does that mean? I feel like it must mean something like white, steel, black, something. I remember, like, Czerny or something. Yeah, Czerny is black, I think.
I think the CZ might be more of a zh, like a Czerwona, something like that.
Mm-hmm. It probably depends on the Slavic language, because, yeah. It's... So... Yeah, maybe something white, something black. Maybe it involves swords. The cover involves swords. And this is out on the basically Eastern Europe exclusive East Hate Productions.
So is East Hate a like sub label of Eastside Slavonic Identity, or?
Is that what Eastside? I don't know about Eastside. There's its own website for East Hate. Let's see. Let's look on Eastside Slavonic identity. Damn.
Well, I mean, people mostly just call it East Side, and East Side.
I did see Slavonic identity somewhere on the thing, and I was just like, well, this is extremely Slavic.
Now, East Side's a really important label. They're the guys who put out like Dub Buck and Ludo Missile and a lot of that kind of stuff. You know, stuff that was like sort of like.
Oh yeah, this has got to be that label. Yes.
Yeah, it was like tied with BBH, but wasn't them directly.
Maybe I misread it. Maybe it does say East Side, but I just, because of the weird... I thought so.
I was wondering if it was an imprint, you know?
Because of the intense Gothic font, I think for some reason I misread it. Let's see what they're... Okay, East... Hey. I just want to see if I'm insane. Oh, maybe it's the name of their website. That's got to be it. Yeah, it's their website and distro. There we go.
I got you. So it's Eastside Slavonic Identity. Yeah, no, Eastside's a fucking great label, man. They put out all the Dub Buck stuff. I just checked. Apparently it wasn't Ludo Missile, but they put out some of like the side projects of Nocturnal Mortem. It's one of those underground labels that's been plugging away for a long time and they never had like their own sound. It's mostly just, who are our friends around here? Let's put out their records. But they happened to be friends with great musicians, so they put out a ton of great stuff. And they've released like all the stuff.
I think it's very... and I don't think they have any interest in like expanding to the West. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like if you know it, you know it, you know?
Yeah. So, next one is also, in a different way, a very, very Eastern Europe specific band, which is Khors, Khors, who you've probably at least heard of. Khors is the band that has the rhythm section from Astrophase in it. And it's Where the Word Acquires Eternity is the record. And that's out now on Ashen Dominion, which is a label that's either run by one of the guys or one of the people in associated bands like Ig or Ulveger. They do really nice merch and packaging often. So a site and a label well worth checking out, and some of the related bands are good. I think Ulveger is excellent. And as a band, Khors, I think, has a much bigger following out there than they do over here. As if you're really into black metal, if you're really into black metal, you'll know the name. But I looked on some of their YouTube videos, and the comments are just all in Cyrillic.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of those bands who just make livings out in Eastern Europe, you know, and don't really get over here. So it's always interesting to kind of bring those guys out, like Ikotka, when we talked about them the other day.
Absolutely, yeah.
So over on my side, we've been doing a lot of like, meditative, melodic black metal and stuff. I've been guilty of that. Let's wash that away for a couple weeks, probably, and I'm just going to be doing death metal just to, like, get my death metal guy cred back.
We did some ugly stuff last week, but it wasn't death metal.
Yeah, we did Cultum and Terradon, who are great. But, so first off, I've got Cranial Contamination with Into the Warp, a Warhammer 40,000 themed slam death band. Really?
Yes!
I knew you would be stoked as soon as I said that. And that's out on Reality Fade Records, who we haven't covered before, but I think I brought up. They're very similar in the kind of stuff they put out to a label called Rising Nemesis Records. I believe Rising Nemesis are from Germany, and Reality Fade is from the Ukraine. But they both do kind of polished, modern, brutal death, some slam, some deathcore, stuff like that. Honestly, I confuse the two labels a lot because they put out very similar sounding stuff, but both of them are solid in their own right, if a little bit inconsistent from band to band. And to close us out in what is a first, but probably almost certainly not a last for Terminus, we're covering a band with the same name as a band we've previously covered, as is Metal Tradition. So, we are going to be covering the opening full-length record from Forgotten Tomb, Chile, with Death is Just Another Path, over on the imprint Cadaverismo, which appears to be just a very small local, I want to say Chilean, but I'm not 100% confirmed, label that I think they just have a Facebook and they just post grainy cell phone pictures of the CDs or the tapes they have out and patches and stuff and just sell them over Facebook. Go over there. It's fucking awesome. If you want to feel like you're tape trading in the 80s again, go over to that shit and support them. And support this band. We're going to get into that. It's
the music really sounds like it too, right?
Absolutely. Just nice and grainy. And
honestly, the music kind of reminds... Now that you say NME at the beginning of the show, if you like NME, if you're one of the... If you're one of the chosen few who think that NME is good music, then Forgotten Tomb is for you.
All right, so first up, Slavland with Stal, Biała, Krew, Czerwona. So this is a band that we both have some experience with, but different eras, I think.
Yeah, I think together we cover it.
Yeah. So since I come a little earlier, I'm familiar with kind of the early 2000s stuff by Slavland, like Zapomniani Kurhani and Zepti Starek Debo, especially. And from what I've gathered, just from piecing together what you said, and like Bandcamp reviews, it feels like there was a big shift because the old Slavland I remember is super weird. Like 300 BPM blasting rickety drum machine with pagan riffs and kind of howling vocals.
Sounds great.
I always described it as like kind of like Forefather on PCP, but Slavic. But
and Forefather is already Forefather on PCP.
Yeah, that's true. And then you're more familiar with the more recent stuff, right?
Yeah, I think this was a Bandcamp find for me a couple of years ago, or not a couple, probably a while ago now, probably back in 2016, and and I saw the title Slavland, and I thought, don't mind if I do.
This is made for me.
And for a long time I sort of thought that was the name of the album, not the name of the band.
Yeah.
It's like even cooler that that's just the name of the band. But what I gotta say is, my opinion on all I can say on this release, not to give it too much away, and on everything, the one I heard before, Wiek or something.
Yeah, it should be Wiek.
Wiek, yeah.
Oh, well, actually,
Wiek.
It's Polish. It might be Wiek. Yeah.
Yeah, Wiek. Okay, so it was really, really good. And I can describe a little more. Yeah, I guess, yeah, so Wiek is this newer sound, and it's struck me as very... I've said something on the show before about wanting to hear more kind of full spectrum black metal. Now that we've spent the last 20 years kind of developing all these intensified niche sounds like Slavic and Finnish and
you want to hear something that ties it all together.
And French. Yeah, something, and even if you're working in one of these niches that sort of gets back at that full range that the early Scandinavians bands had. And only a few have had since then. So Wiek is like Slavic full spectrum black metal. It really covers, it's got folk influences done really well, that just sound primeval and reptile-brained and very authentic. It's got fast, aggressive blasting parts that are often less common in the more Slavic stuff, and I think have some Finnish influence. And it's got these really cool, just folky, chorded stuff and stompy, everything you could want. And it fits together marvelously. It kind of...
Yeah. I think this is, in a sense, and this might sound kind of weird, one of the best direct continuations of Graveland, in a sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
In that it and not necessarily...
Are you shifting to the new album? Because I was still talking about the last one.
No, I'm still talking about this one, just because, Graveland was... especially early stuff like Following the Voice of Blood that you showed me was never tied to this one hyper-precise idea. It was much more full spectrum. And I think this is kind of a good continuation of it. This is an extremely varied and dynamic record.
So this has that, so on... Yeah, so this new one it continues the innovations on the last one, this sort of full spectrum Slavic black metal thing. But where Viek felt very kind of symphonic, it just had this, it was this total structure. All of the songs had these kinds of sort of developments in them and things like that. Mm-hmm. And if there was any limitation to it, it was almost just too good. You know what I mean? Like, black metal often has to have something kind of a little excessive or wonky about it.
Yeah.
Or just something coloring a little bit out of the lines.
Well, instead of too good, do you mean kind of like too polished?
Maybe, yeah. He's a really good musician. Mm-hmm. And so maybe and I think just because the album's amazing, I think I'm going to go with that's not a problem. It's just way more polished than you'd expect for something like this. This new one is a little bit much more of a songs and riffs record. Yeah. But it's got a lot, but in a good sense too, because it has a lot more of that. It has more of the shoot from the hip energy.
Yeah, no, when I approached this, I saw, because I knew there was a new Slavland out. I had just stumbled across it at one point. And I didn't listen to it at the time because I was kind of worried, especially with like some of the comments I was seeing. It's like, oh, Slavland more polished. And, my love of Slavland was the unhinged, go for the throat quality of the early stuff. But there's still a lot of that here. It's been It's been refined. Clearly, this is a guy with 20 years of experience in this band behind him, but it doesn't. It really doesn't lose that initial energy, and that's what makes it really worthwhile to me. Is the fact that you start from this like unhinged, probably like teenager or 20-year-old perspective. Mm-hmm. You expand upon it, but you never lose that initial kernel of what makes it special, and I think that's why I like this so much.
Cool. Yeah, and I think he's really grown. My guess would be, based on what you just said, is that he's grown as a guitarist a lot.
Yeah, I would say that. The riffing, it does seem more complete in a way. Mm-hmm. A lot of the riffs on early Slavland were kind of like early forefather, like, hyper-speed Slavic NWOBHM riffs, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure I'll love that, so I need to listen to it.
Oh, no, it's awesome. Dude, I'm telling you right now, that fucking Jepti Starek Bibo, fucking sick, man. You gotta listen to that shit.
All right, so...
Let's get to some tunes. Let's get to tunes, man.
Yeah, so I think for our listeners, this will be... This first one is just from a sample from the back end, just the whole back end of the first track on this record. The beginning of the first track is a little, I guess I'll just say, runs through a series of kind of darker riffs, and all of them were fine. I was just thinking, like, when is it going to Slavland? When is it? I was like, is this going to be a different kind of record or something? And then at a certain point, it starts Slavlanding very hard. And this is just from the back end of the song. It contains, I think, runs the gamut of all the cool things about this band.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's Lechal Vnuki?
Yeah.
And
sounds good.
Does it start at 5 minutes? Because that's like a 3-minute sample.
I took the liberty, my friend. It's so good. It's so good.
All right.
What we're also doing is catching them up on the last record and on the things that have changed in the band.
Yeah, that works. All right, so let's run it.
Yeah. All right.
Poniosło pożony Lewo w nogi Murem starego kontynentu Dziś bastiony Od zachodnich kraj Chcesz odstawiać w obliczu Ten czas będzie niósł spustoszenie Księżycowe sztandary
So here's the curious thing. Slavland still uses a drum machine, right?
I guess, which I never thought about when I was listening to the last one, but I often don't think enough about drums. I do more now than I did back then.
Well,
yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's still a drum machine. I can't find anything about him having a drummer now. But now I'm wondering, is he, like, deliberately programming in sort of, like, stumbles in the drums? Because there's, like, a couple things where it's like they skip a beat or he's got to catch up and there's, like, weird volume fluctuation. It almost sounds like he's deliberately made it sound like a much more competent Capricornus or something. You know what I mean?
Interesting. I could see that only because, given that, yeah, he's kind of making music that doesn't sound like a Graveland clone, but is totally in the mold of Graveland.
Yeah.
Rob Darkin meticulously programs his drum machine, and I think what he does is he uses one of those pads that rappers have.
Yeah. So he's
like
manually programming it, like, on the fly, probably. Yeah.
Exactly. You can hear weird Capricornus-esque slowdowns in programmed Graveland songs.
Yeah, that's how, interesting side note from the death metal guy, that's how Brodequin does it live now.
Really?
No, the drummer, John Engman, who's a guy that I actually personally know from back in the day, he's got, like, a fucked up back, but he still wanted to perform it live, so to speak, so he gets a manual drum pad on stage and plays it live on the pad. And it's a fascinating effect, you know?
That's pretty cool. I gotta give himself carpal tunnel from that, but...
Yeah, I was like, you're gonna fuck up another part of your body doing it like that.
Hey, if it gets him 10 more years, who cares, you know?
And especially, I mean, imagine trying to, like, play the Brodequin blast beats live on your fingers.
Oh, God. Yeah. Yeah, well, it'll give him, you know, maybe that'll buy him 3 years, long enough for his back to recover, right? You know?
That's true.
Demon as his, tendonitis got better.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Oh.
So, but yeah, like, back to Slavland. Honestly, no, that's sick. I think that the point of divergence here will be, I just know based on experience, you're much more into those kind of, like, peasant folky parts than I am.
Yeah, and there aren't so many of them on here that they would greatly irk you.
No, they don't bother me. Honestly, it's one of those things, it sounds like faint praise, but it's honestly like pretty significant praise that they do not bother me on this record at all.
I know what you mean, yeah.
They're usually the worst part of a black metal album for me, like especially a Slavic black metal album, but here it's like, it's fine, I get their purpose, and they work as kind of like energy builders before an explosive riff like the one at the end there, so I'm cool with
God, yeah. He gets what I like about the folk stuff. That's one of the things I like about this band is it sounds like he listens to folk music and has tried to learn how to play it. Yeah. And I think he's using there's a picture of him on Metal Archives blowing a big ram's horn.
Yeah.
But I think that sound, it's either a bagpipe or maybe a shawm. I think a shawm is like a weird, it's one of the things that makes that crazy sound. And what's
the Slavic instrument that makes that boing spring sound?
Oh, I love that. You know, the Scandinavians use that too. That's the mouth harp.
Oh, that's a mouth harp?
Or the jaw harp, yeah. Yeah, no, the oldest example of that I can find is on Helheim's Jormungand. And
I just remember it being all over like Newer Take and something like Nechrist Nocturnal Mortem shit.
It's a good way to make something sound like folky in a really kind of ignorant way. Again, that's the other thing. It's got this kind of Less so. The last album really had parts that sounded like folk dances or whatever. This part just sounded like a kind of had that kind of almost redneck hoedown quality to it,
which is how you know it's real folk. Yeah.
Yeah, true. Yeah, exactly. And I really liked it. It was it really reminded me of Voito Te Valhalla by Goat Moon.
Yeah, real folk doesn't sound like classical music brought down. It sounds like a fucking hoedown. And I could get into the whole thing. The whole reason that bluegrass and like Appalachian folk music sounds like it does is because it's derived directly from Celtic folk music.
Yeah,
which is not this like polished fucking classy thing. It's shit for you to drink to, you know?
Yeah. So this has... Yeah, the last one had more of a peasant festival quality. This has way more of a getting drunk with your buddies and playing the fucking shawm.
Yeah. That's fucking sick.
Yeah, it's got... Yeah, I guess we should talk about how cool the riffs after that were, or move on to your sample.
Well, let's get to my sample, because then I've got things to say about kind of the guitar style here, as well as kind of meta things about how we chose our samples, which kind of suggests something about the way this album is structured, I think.
All right, cool.
So I've got a sample off, again, forgive me for my pronunciation, it's going to be Vo something along the lines of that.
All right.
A W on its own in Polish is pronounced as V. So
I love that it's just a W on its own.
Yeah, so. No, you'll see that. I think it's it's like an article for them, like A or something like that.
Oh, I get that.
So let's listen to the last part of that track real quick.
Cool.
So yeah, hey, wait, is this the death metal guy picking the giant climax of a black metal song? Who would have thought?
But I'm glad you stuck around. I was trying to figure. I love this whole thing so much. It was hard for me to pick anything. I was like, well, I hope he picks those parts.
Well, what's interesting though is actually 3 of our 4 samples are big climactic moments off the ends of songs. Which indicates to me that he's kind of like creating a narrative for these songs in this very deliberate way. He wants them to crescendo at the very end. There's not a lot of variation in terms of like the structural idea behind this stuff, which isn't a problem. Like they're honestly, in a sense, they're almost constructed like folk songs.
He's got, on this record, everything's kind of got a template. He'll start out with some solid A-B black metal riffing, and then some more kind of folky and or mid-tempo stuff in the middle. Yeah. And then speed it up again. Yeah.
Yeah, and then kick it out at the end with like a huge tremolo riff over
Kick it out really hard, right? It's it's like the ends of the songs. I think it's what you're saying. He probably writes the ends first.
Yeah, and then it's figuring out how to get there. I could see that.
Because the ends are usually like 2 or 3 minutes, you know what I mean? Like, it's...
Yeah, well, there's, it's weird, kind of, I wrote in my notes that there didn't seem to be a tremendous amount of direct Graveland inspiration here, but I think there is. I think I was wrong about that.
Okay, how so?
because we were talking before we kind of got into it that, you know, Graveland early stuff was not as wedded to this intensely specific idea of, you know, what Slavic black metal is, because there was no paradigm for it.
Yeah.
So now Slavland is kind of taken, like you said, this kind of like pan black metal approach, but deeply Slavic. But it's incorporating everything. There's obvious nods to like Nocturnal Mortem, especially on the folk parts. There's, I think there's a lot of Arcona in this. Obviously much more extreme.
God, yeah, because I haven't heard the early Arcona. I only know, or I've heard it enough to like not really. I've heard Gods of War enough to be like, I don't really get this. I'm going to need to listen to this again.
Oh, Arcona. Well, which Arcona? Are you talking about Arcona from Russia? Or?
Oh, you're thinking about the Russian one. I'm thinking about the Polish one.
Yeah. Oh, no, yeah, I'm thinking of the Russian Arcona, who are very poppy, but very good for kind of pop black metal. But the other thing that I really want to bring up is, in the riffs, is Ludomissel, who we've talked about a couple times on this show, but I think are a much more important band to the Slavic scene than most people recognize.
Well, they're certainly one of the best. They don't get mentioned a lot because they're kind of, in terms of their best records, they're like just extraordinarily good, but the riffing doesn't have a folky quality to it.
Yeah, no.
And it's also more like conventional, aggressive blasting black metal, right?
Yeah, but those fucking mid-era records, you know, Decadence and Catharsis and De Profundis are like, you listen to those albums and they're 100% riff slideshows, but the sort of riffing technology established on those records, I think, continues to inform Slavic black metal to this day. And
interesting. I think it sounds French. I think it sounds like Death Spell Omega riffs, like the good ones.
To a degree, but there's a melodic consonance to it that, you know, it misses all that sort of like post-hardcore influence that I think a lot of those bands...
No, I just mean like the really big riffs on DSO, like the ones that sound really French.
Oh, okay,
like,
okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but that's something I detect on a lot of these big climax riffs is, you know, Ludomissel and, you know, Astrophase to a degree.
Oh, sure.
Who are closely tied to Ludomissel. But, yeah, there's this... I like the idea that... I feel like Slavland is almost attempting to sculpt out this idea of pagan metal as a distinct idea. You know, because, you know, it's a term that's informally used, but what does it mean? Well, it might mean Slavland, because it's not... Because you can't take the folk parts out without reducing the band. You know, I'm not the biggest fan of them, but clearly they're important to the context of this music.
Couldn't this just be a kind of black metal? I would say you could also relate this to the idea of black metal sort of growing into folk music, kind of.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I guess it could be a kind of black metal, but then I guess it depends on... Well, you know, I made the comparison to Forefather earlier. Forefather's great, but is it black metal in the way that you understand it? Because I don't really think that it is. I think it's kind of...
Forefather's definitely not, I would say. I think, like... The thing about this is, like, the guitar technique... I mean, well, it's a weird thing, right? Because it's like, if you want a genre to develop, you can't... It's tricky, because on the one hand, you want to keep a pure sense of what the thing is about, right? On the other hand, if you want a genre to develop, you can't take the things that are new or weird and say, yeah, this is a new thing entirely. You know what I mean? I guess I tend to group pagan metal, good pagan metal like this under black metal in general.
I gotcha.
You know what I mean? And then there's pagan metal, which is usually bad.
Yeah.
Right. Which is usually some sort of awful netherworld somewhere between Fin Troll and actual extreme metal.
Yeah.
But I hear what you mean, that this is very, I think it ticks all the boxes you'd want for a black metal record, but it does it thoroughly within this kind of epic, very melodic, folky vibe.
Yeah.
Right? there's no interrupting Dark Throne riff on this.
Definitely.
And even the more aggressive, I think that makes it good, like say in the breakdown parts on the part I sampled, even the darker breakdown parts exist within this folky sound universe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I hear where you're coming from. I agree. I can hear the Luda Missile thing, especially in some of those big soaring rising riffs. Mm-hmm. I think another source for this, this comes out of a tradition that does Slavic stuff that is more a part of this Slavic takes on blast and black metal. Well, so you've got Luda Missile, you've got Astrophase, and I'd say also Crota. Are you familiar with the earlier Crota stuff?
I've listened to it very sparingly back in the day. I know they're important, but I'm not that familiar, really.
He's another one of these kinds of, you wouldn't, like Luda Missile, you wouldn't put him in the first tier of, Graveland, BBH, Drug at their best, Hate Forest, Astrophase, right?
Yeah.
That might be the number one tier. But as far as the bands behind that, I think Crota is very good. Crota had kind of hit or miss. Crota was cursed by weird production and some strange songwriting decisions early on, but the guy's a really great riff writer, and it might just be because I'm not as familiar with Nocturnal Mortem, but to me the folk parts in Slavland remind me a lot of the way he integrates folk parts. Okay. And I think as far as extremely... I'm sort of getting ahead of myself because your next sample has this kind of extremely sentimental riff that you didn't... You're definitely sounds like a newer thing. Mm-hmm. Well, try this. This is Crota in 2004, but I think they were really ahead of the curve on this, and you can hear some of the effective integration of, in this case, extremely fruity folk parts. So let's start at the beginning of Endless Path of Legends. You're going to love this.
Well, there's a song title for you. Jesus.
Oh, yeah, true. But yeah, all right. So you ready?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, let's go. So how about those hyper melodic Slav riffs plus death metal?
That sounds way later than 2004. Like, that's really ahead of the curve. You're right about that.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? And I think the things that make this album less maybe famous than it could be is probably a lot of people won't want those really death metal-y parts.
I think they're important, though.
I agree, and it's part of the full spectrum idea, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, I think his version of, like, say, a Emperor riff or whatever, his version of throwing in the Norwegian-sounding riff or whatever in this is doing this kind of more dissonant death metal riffing, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you were able to get a lusher sound on those chug parts, there are parts later on the record that have just straight up death metal trem riffing, and like they're quite good. But I think a lot of people probably won't be. He asks you to move through these dramatically shifting moods, and because it's 2004, some of the death metal sound is really thin. But this record, people should be paying way more attention to this early stuff, and I think it's a big source for a lot of the Slavland ideas.
Definitely.
Even just the crisp right hand work that you were talking about.
Oh yeah, definitely. The right hand stuff on that is very advanced for Slavic black metal at that time. So we've got next up we got 2 samples off the same song. Should we go with yours first or mine first? Because mine comes at the end of the song.
Let's play them, and since I just talked a lot about both of these, let's which of course I was gonna fucking do. Let's just do mine pretty quick, and then into yours. Yeah.
All right, so let's start at towards the beginning of Legendak Zakleya.
About a minute in, yeah. So is that kind of like the older Forefather stuff you were talking about?
To a degree, the drums would be twice as fast there. You know, they would be doubled up and totally inhuman. So I think that it's like they would have had that kind of punky vibe, but definitely like parallel evolution. I do not get the sense that this guy listens to any punk whatsoever. You know?
Yeah, no, that's... Well, there's a part in the middle of this album that has kind of the Earth AD riff, the devil-like riff. I don't know.
I think that's coincidental, though. I think that's...
Could be.
I mean, that's such a simple riff, and so many people have kind of fucked around with it.
Well, he's definitely not a metal punk guy, you know.
Yeah,
he's definitely a metalhead's metalhead. This guy has a chin beard. You know, so just really good, fast, droney riffing. Very easy to write a riff that sort of sounds like, as yours truly can attest. But to make it really good requires being as fast as he is and having his mastery of texture.
Yeah.
Because, like, the fullness of his chording it's very easy, as we're going to hear with Khors, it's very easy to make chords that sound kind of like Druid chords.
Yeah.
But as far as mastering this sort of lush,
how do you turn it into a riff? You know?
Yeah, how do you make riffs out of chords, which we can talk about for Khors, and also, how do you include actually just this rich texture in it? Well, this guy's one of the few who can.
Yeah, well, so let's get to my part at the end of that same song, which ties back into the Crota stuff, and here's another big climax moment for the end of a track on this album. So let's give that a try.
All right, where it's 5:36. All right.
So, what strikes me about that part is how fucking sentimental that main riff is. Which I don't think you could have gotten away with that 10 years ago. Like, I get what you're saying with the Crota, but this is a step beyond. This is much closer to something like Winterfilleth, or almost, honestly, some of the more sophisticated, like, fast, depressive black metal stuff out there has riffs kind of similar to that.
What is it? The change in the bass note, right? That can be a DSBM thing, right?
Definitely.
Da, da, da. Yeah, but yeah, definitely sounds like some of my favorite of the really fruity Winterfilleth riffs. My favorite ones. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, that's good that you brought that up because the bass guitar is really important on this record. It really stands out in the production, and it's doing a lot of counterpoint stuff against some of those more drony riffs that gives them kind of an outsized personality.
Gives them a little more.
Yeah, versus just based on them on guitar alone.
It adds a percussive quality to them too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think this album as a whole is I feel like I haven't listened to Wiek, but I'm guessing this is kind of simpler music than Wiek. I'm guessing that this is like a little bit more stripped down, and I think one of the things that I like is the deliberate, even-handed primitivity of it.
Yeah, that's a good, really nice way of putting it. It's not, sometimes when people do things like that, when they attempt to reduce their style, they stumble, but in this case it's graceful and, no fancy tricks are being attempted or are necessary, right?
Yeah, very straightforward.
Yeah, so, I mean, as far as this band, I'm really glad you like it, bro. When at the beginning I thought, like, given that he liked their gorked drum machine stuff, I bet the death metal guy might not like this one as much.
This is not as far from that as you would think. Just strip out some of the most overtly folky parts and just like pump up the tempo even further, and you've basically got the same general idea.
That's great. Yeah. So then, I mean, I think you'd like Wiek too, just because it's totally the same band. And there are really good blasting parts, but I think you would like this one better because it's more unhinged.
Okay, I gotcha. No, this definitely makes me want to check out all the intervening albums that I missed from when I listened to them when I was a lot younger.
Yeah, this is just, I mean, there are a lot of them too, right?
Yeah.
And this is a band that people from the West do not listen to, except, there's a review from 2007 by somebody whose name is Chernobog, so presumably a fellow Slav. No, never mind, just a German. A German Slavophile. But, so about this, I just fucking love this, and, I would say, bad year for any band being in the same year when a Slavland record comes out, for me, in terms of me. So, like, I think Oppressive Descent was holding its own as my album of the year for this year, especially for black metal. And I think I gotta say, look, that record is fantastic. If you haven't heard it, you should absolutely check it out. But this is gonna be my new number one, man. Slavland.
Ooh, that's bold. Shit.
Well, it's just, it's, I think as far as nowadays bands, it's one of my favorites, And kind of one of those things that I would always, like, forget to listen to. And then when I listened, I'd be like, this puts me in an amazing mood. Why don't I listen to this every day?
Fair enough.
And so now there's this second one that's a little less emotionally consuming for me to listen to and a little more just like straight ahead black metal. And so I know I'm going to listen to this a lot.
Just throw it on and enjoy yourself, right?
And so for the end, I want my endorsement. This also, Wiek has the best Bandcamp review of all time by this other guy, this Russian dude named Radagast.
Yeah.
And Radagast, for the listeners, if you can't see it, you should totally look this up on the Bandcamp. But he has kind of like a medieval haircut and a tucked-in shirt with a bear on it. And what he writes is, Slavland is masterpiece! And that is all I have to say. Slavland is masterpiece!
Well, we gotta end on that, so we'll take a quick break. We'll be back with some more Slavic shit for you.
Yeah.
This is a little one Gash, and you're listening to Terminus.
Alright, so next up, we've got Khors, Where the Word Acquires Eternity. on Ashen Dominion. So I'd actually, you said that people probably heard of it. I've actually never heard of these guys before. So what's your experience?
Sorry, I just assumed everyone's a massive fucking Slavonic black metal nerd.
I mean, I am, but mostly just old stuff, so...
Yeah, fair enough. So, Khors has actually been around about as long as Slavland or Crota. Or Crota's older than that. Crota's goes back to the 94, but...
Yeah, it looks like Khors is from 2004 on.
Yeah, so it goes back about, same age as Slavland, maybe a little more recent. And what Khors it was formed by the rhythm section of Astrophase after Astrophase broke up.
Are they broken? I thought they got back together. Did they?
Did they? That would be sick.
Oh, no, I guess not. But for some reason, I thought that they were still doing shit. Anyway.
No, and for a long time, the original guitarist was the guy who's in who's in Olver, who are good, who are in Ig, who I think are sort of so, and who was in a crazy band named Runes of Dionset, who I've been meaning to look into more.
That sounds like a sick name.
Yeah, you'd really like it. Yeah, they're insane. It's like Slavonic black metal RAC kind of stuff.
Oh, okay. So, right up my alley.
Totally reptile brain. Yeah. There's video of them on stage, and they're all just struggling to stand up.
There we go.
It's
the drunker, the better.
Yeah. So Helg was the original guitarist, and then for a while it overlapped with the younger guy, and now at this point Helg is out doing his other bands, and the younger guy has taken over. And I think for a long time there might be, given the other bands Helg was in, my guess is maybe there's some old album that I'd like a lot, but I've tried hard to listen to a fair amount of Khors records, at least the newer stuff, because they come very authentically from this Ukrainian black metal tradition, right? They've got direct descent from Astrophase, and the general sound is the full outline of the Astrophase Drug sound, but the stuff I've heard generally has left me kind of cold.
Yeah.
Often it's, as we were talking about on the last thing, it takes a lot to write drug-style chords, but can you make riffs with them?
Yeah. I could bust out a Drudk chord on my guitar right now, but I don't know I'd be able to make a meaningful riff out of it.
And the riffing was also more distant from folk stuff on this, and so the way I heard them is they're kind of a reliable, just solid Slavic black metal, big block chords, has some of that aggression that went missing from Drug after a while, and they had one hit song to me, which is the last song off their last record, which is called My Cossack Way. Which is a great fucking name for a song.
Great
it's
title.
Like, Dimitri, you're leaving already? Sorry, babe, that's just my Cossack way.
Yo, bitch, that's my Cossack way.
Dimitri, I didn't know you were a paramilitary. Sorry, babe, that's just my Cossack way. It's
oh man.
But they're, and I've seen good live footage of them. So my thought is that in a country where, none of these canonical bands play live anymore. So I think Khors' niche has been being the live band to see if you are in Eastern Europe and you like this stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that.
It's
I mean, people. A lot of people, like internet metal people, forget how vital the live environment is, especially in, I don't want to sound backhanded, but less developed places. I mean, especially if you're in the Ukraine or something. Well, you know what I mean.
Ukraine is. I'm not
suggesting.
No, I know.
They're not fucking Stone Age.
Currently war-racked.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, they're definitely the Middle Ages. Yeah. It's
So should we get to our primary conflict, or?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, my context for this is I brought this one on the show because I was listening to black metal promotion, or I just saw that they were doing a premiere, and then they were doing a premiere of a thing with a cool cover with a raven skull thing on it, and I was like, oh, Khors, I knew them, and I was like, maybe this new one's good, because I always wanted them to be good, and what it struck me as was very different from the old Khors. So the record critic-y thing is just, they didn't really have their, quote, own sound before, and now they kind of have they have a much more distinctive sound. And because on the show we've been talking a lot about. Let's just get out of the way. This is an extremely poppy record that has it's not really a black metal record. I know people say that all the time, and that doesn't mean you're not allowed to hate it for whatever reason, but it's definitely not a black metal record. And we've been talking a lot about on the show about this sort of poppier side and more melodic side of extreme metal. The death metal guy often brings up parallels with metalcore and melodic death metal and stuff. And this record's got a lot of that. Yeah. And just the most sentimental kind of black gazy extremes of the Ukrainian sound. And so I thought, I think the death metal... I listened through it all, and I was like, I rather like this. I kind of enjoy it. And I was like, I think maybe the death metal guy would like it more than me. But
I think that this is probably going to be the most polarizing opinions we've had since the I-Ray record so many episodes back. I might actively hate this record. And I feel bad saying, although at the same time we were talking about, it's like, should we just swap it out for something else? And I'm like, no, we haven't really disagreed on a record in a long time. I think this is a good discussion to have. Because I'm
not going to champion it too hard just because it's not black metal. You know what I mean? But for the sake of argument, I'll do my best.
Well, that being said, you basically like it, don't you?
I think I did. I mean, we'll see, right? I mean, going back through it, maybe I listened to it in a open frame of mind. I said, I'm going to just listen to this and see how it goes. And I was like, yeah, I like this. It's, so we'll get to my sample. It's, and I think as far as a mood on this record, I think it's got this kind of, dark fantasy kind of mood where it's like, that stuff you'd be into in middle school or high school. That's
interesting because I actually see it as kind of slightly urban in a way.
No, that too. Yeah, so kind of anime, urban dark fantasy.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. It is like a little bit anime or manga.
Yeah, and I like it's the cover. The cover sums it. It's very urban, but it's also got this big raven skull thing opening over it and flights of birds.
I think I get what they're going for.
I get what they're going for, and I get it being the kind of thing where I was in high school, I could have been like, this is a little cheesy, but I like it.
Yeah.
And so, although in high school I never would have listened to this because it sounded way too like this. All right, so I guess we should play some music.
Let's just start with your sample, and then we can kind of get into the primary argument here. So what strikes you about that section?
I think that's my favorite section on the record. I think I genuinely really like that part.
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just
yeah. No, I'm just saying for the listeners. I'm not just for the sake of argument. I really like that part. Even it's the basically what you heard for most of that is the same extremely simple kind of early Amon Amarth riff. It's really a Once Sent to the Golden Hall riff.
I can see that.
Played as this kind of eternally looping Slavonic black metal riff. That's a big idea in Slavic bands, is like the infinite riff.
Yeah.
And so they've taken an Amon Amarth riff and done that with it. And the playing, as I noticed more the second time around, but the playing on it is really raw, which I think makes it. I think I like it better than I would if it were played very cleanly. But it's kind of
you hear that kind of right-hand attack on it.
You hear the right-hand attack, yeah. You hear almost a squeak in the picking. It's got that squalling sound. It's very aggressive. And that becomes the base for all this other stuff that happens. Mostly like some really fruity keyboards, but I think really well composed, not too loud, very anime soundtrack sounding, kind of soaring, and a literal metalcore breakdown, which I think is as metalcore breakdowns go, very bog standard, but I think in this context brings in some needed bite to it.
I gotcha. So, I do like that Once Sent from the Golden Hall riff. I mean, it's kind of like too simple on its own, but it would be a good interrupter riff. I've used that term before, just like kind of a bridging riff. I kind of disagree on the keyboards. Like, it's too... I don't know. It's like... It feels very stock to me. It's like, oh, let's just hit like the root notes and those kind of harmonic chords on the keyboards, and it's like, oh, okay.
Isn't there a melody on it? Like...
I mean, it's kind of blending in with the guitars to a degree. There's a little bit of melody there, but it's not really exciting enough to capture my interest. It sounds fine. But what you did say was like full-fledged metalcore breakdown. Yeah, I mean, there definitely is one there, and that's something we'll get into here.
All right.
So, well, we're talking about metalcore. I'll get to my next sample, and then we'll kind of get into our primary argument here. So, I've got a sample off the next track, which is called Crystals of the Fall. So, let's listen to that section real quick, and then we'll kind of get into it a little bit deeper. Yeah, that's not a black metal record.
No, certainly not.
So here's my thing. I've talked a lot about how I love when black metal bands do these sort of like metalcore gestures. But here's my issue with this record. The predominant thing that bothers me is that there's so much of it on this record. There's usually like a couple of moments like this on each song. Which means that the songs are structured more like metalcore songs than black metal songs. So you've got this situation where you've got these things that are ostensibly black metal songs, but they're all just pushing towards the breakdown moment. And when you structurally change it like that, you lose some of what I'm really interested in black metal, which are kind of like dynamic morphing song structures. And this is like a continuous thing throughout the album. It's like every one of these tracks has like 2 fucking metalcore breakdowns on it. And as a result, they just swallow up the songs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I guess I heard it from basically the beginning. I was like, at least when I heard that first kind of, I went into it thinking I'm gonna just listen to some really kind of cheesy Slavic fantasy metal, and I like the cover art, so let's just go. Yeah. So when I got to this part, my thought was, wow, that's a bad metalcore breakdown. Mm-hmm. I agree with you that that's just bog standard as metalcore breakdowns go, and it's played kind of too... Now, listening to it again now, it's like also played too high on the fretboard, I think. Yeah. Which is maybe a translation error from the black metal.
Yeah.
But it's, yeah, no, I don't think anything about this is... I guess what I was trying to do is apply a different set of criteria to it, and what I heard this band doing is take the things that are subtly metalcore or parallel to metalcore in the more melodic modern black metal, or the sentimental streak in Slavic black metal, or the kind of symphonic streak in it, and just really just blow that out into something that is just a different genre of music.
Well, and so I can kind of imagine that working, but I think the reality is they lose a lot of the Slav touch, and it sounds like U.S. melodic metalcore. You know?
Well, that part certainly sounded pretty U.S. I think there's Slav stuff in the chords, but it's this other side of, it's like symphonic Slav BM. I'm thinking of like, the newer Arcona from Poland is, I mean, just leagues better than this, and very much black metal, but it has this kind of vampire video game gothic quality to it,
which is very cool. I'll totally be down for that anytime.
I think you'd probably like that one better than this. That's or also there's a new band called Escapism, ESKAPISM, which is not a great name, but that's
not Jesus.
That's Ukrainian, and he plays in Crota Live, I think, and that is very flamboyant symphonic black metal, but it's also very black metal. Mm-hmm. And so this is like some of that kind of moody, depressive, symphonic quality in something that's really a lot more like a rock album.
Honestly, I don't want to give the impression that my issue is with the poppiness. Because my issue is totally with the fact that it's losing some of the cool things about black metal song structures, like it's just these songs are so fucking predictable with how they're going to progress,
and so they I guess if they were metalcore songs, you would say they work more as metalcore songs.
I mean, to a degree.
I guess the degree is like these because they're in this hybrid state, they don't pass muster as metalcore songs.
But the thing is, the thing is, regular metalcore songs are 3 to 4 minutes long. These are 7 minutes long. So it's like...
Okay, see, yeah, no, that's what I meant. It's like, when I first listened to this, I basically wasn't listening to the structures at all. It was pretty deep. I gave it one through and was like, okay, hey, this is actually cool. Let's put it on. But I certainly hear what you mean. I mean, I imagine a lot of our fans were not super into that breakdown.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
So let's try. This is another thing as far as playing up the. So I guess to me a lot is like there's this cheesy kind of almost emo side of Slavic black metal that generally makes things like Latter-day Druid worse, right?
Yeah.
When Druid starts to sound like Alcest or whatever. They've been doing this kind of urban fantasy thing too. I think the latest Druid album actually is quite good, but it's very far into this almost emo territory. And another weird tendency, if we've got the symphonic and the emo tendencies in Slavic black metal, is guitar solos.
Yeah, which I don't necessarily hate inherently.
No, I mean some of Senko's solos are amazing, and others of them are the worst things I've ever heard in my life. like there's some really good kind of, I think it's on Handful of Stars or something, there's some really good kind of moody, jangly, kind of wussy DSBM kind of stuff in it. And it's just good brooning music. And then he just rips this just awful hard rock solo that's almost in a different key.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's this kind of, guitar solos are a thing that may crop up in Slavic black metal with, highly unpredictable results. And another thing I liked about this band is that they put the guitar solos at the front, and it's like, well, here they're taking this thing that's already latent in it and developing it and putting it in the foreground. So here's a guitar solo driven part, some leads and then some soloing.
Okay.
This is from The Mist. Let this fog devour a snow.
A snow? A single snow? All right.
We're in Slavland, man. Just go with it.
All right, let's try that out. All they know how to do is fucking crescendo. Like that's the entire structure of this album is just crescendoing over and over again, and the crescendos aren't that fucking good. And it's like,
oh yeah, I don't recognize them as crescendos, so that's not a good sign.
Well, I mean, it's just it gets louder and there's more shit going on, and it stops and they restart and they do it again. It's like the structural problems of post metal. You know?
Oh, sure. I mean, post-metal is, one of the creeping influences in Ukrainian black metal, which, again, I think I'd be rather... I guess what I hear this band doing is picking up a lot of trends that in Slavic black metal are, at best, questionable or perilous, and turning all of those trends into its own sound. And I think that's what interests me about this. But I guess on reflection, probably what I like about this record is the broad outlines of it, more than the execution. Does that make sense?
So just kind of the gesture towards these kinds of influences?
Yeah, like, let's make a big, fruity Slavic rock album that has screams in it. And, like, that... I think that idea has legs, and I could imagine them... But I think the detail work really needs some filling in around some of these leads. I think the soloing is good. I think the idea of having a sort of galloping battery riff under it is pretty good. And I kind of like the indulgent, almost genty metalcore thing he does at the end. Those kind of tapped arpeggios.
Yeah.
I think, again, if you're leaning into the cheesy quality of it, why not?
I mean, my issue is not so much the cheese as just, like...
the structure.
Yeah, I mean, it really is kind of a structural issue at a certain point. Mm-hmm. It's just like, you get down to it and you're listening to the same song like 8 times on this guy.
I get that. I think riff for riff, this is certainly not a riff record, and although I get that that's not what they're aiming for something that's even in the realm of metal, there needs to be more riffs than this.
Yeah, you can't really make a metal record that is as kind of riffless as this. Because it doesn't feel like... Well, I guess that's one of my issues is like, so if this isn't riff centered, what is it? It's not keyboard centered because they're not there enough. Not really vocally centered because there's these long instrumental passages. So what are we going for?
Yeah, and the vocals are good, but the vocals have the kind of gutsy quality of that not a lot of the imitators have. But yeah, it's I get what you mean. I mean, I think my considered opinion on this after listening again, but also hearing you criticize, is like, where I can meet you on this is, I think this is an idea of a record. And I think a lot of the parts aren't filled in. I think maybe it bodes well for Khors developing more of an original thing in the future, but you would need more, needs either more riffs or more keyboards. Also just, you could make the breakdowns bang more without too much trouble, right?
Oh, definitely. And, I'll get into that on my last sample, don't worry.
Fully committing to the breakdowns would make those parts way better. It's like, also I think, in the same way that a lot of metalcore bands get their metal at, like, sixth hand, I feel like maybe a lot of metal bands, when they're doing something like this,
are getting their metalcore sixth hand. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, or he probably listens to some, like, I don't know, genty, proggy, modern metalcore that's, whatever these bands are now, and it's like, you should just go, like, listen to, like, stuff from the early 2000s or the 90s, and you could make really good breakdowns.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, let me get to my last sample off a track called Up the Ladder to a Lance. And I'm going to play this, and you're going to cringe audibly.
All right, you're going to make me regret it. All right, let's see. I saw this on the notes, and I was like, oh, great, okay.
You remember this song, don't you?
No. I remember it has a good title, but no, I saw your note saying, I'm going to play this, and you're going to cringe. And I was like, oh, God, I'm in for it. All right.
All right, let's give it a shot. Okay, defend yourself, black metal guy.
Alright, well, it's been a good run, man. I'm glad we made it to 20 episodes.
That's rough, isn't it?
That's pretty rough. I was, at the beginning of that, I was like, okay, look, when I listened to this, the beginning of that, I'm like, okay, this part's really fruity. Everything about me that, like, really fruity in a way that has nothing to do with the music that I really like, right? Mm-hmm. And so at the beginning, I was like, but, hey, this is going to be some rocky, kind of poppy album. Okay, you get your fruity prog part. And I was listening through, I was like, okay, really, if I'm honest, I hate this. I hate all music that sounds like this. It's very difficult to indulge. And then as it got further, you notice that the solo gets lost. And if you have the chance to record your solo again, you should do it. But the end where it's just like fading quieter and quieter. Yeah, that was pretty bad. Not gonna lie. I think when I first heard this, my brain must have just deleted that part.
It's tough, man. And I think those are the things that I seized on this record. It was just those moments, because the other thing I wrote in the notes is every climax of these songs kind of sounds like that, you know?
Ugh. Well, I don't know if it's that bad, but I get what you mean. There are lots. I mean, well, like the solo I just played, right? The solo I played before. It's like the better version of that, but it's not like a great thing. So, I guess, yeah, my thoughts at the end of it is like, I guess Khors has gone from a very solid, Khors has gone from an unremarkable take on a good style, sort of unremarkable and authentic but not particularly interesting take on a good style, to a kind of very original but highly questionable style. Mm-hmm. And I don't think the execution on this, I think you're right about all the things you said about the execution here. It's not so much the combination of things going on here as that they just need to be executed better and differently. Right?
Yeah, I can see that.
I hear that. It's like so. I mean, there's potential for the band in that this is a new sound, but whatever is brewing here, I think it needs to germinate.
Yeah, no, I can say I don't really take issue with the logical idea of this music.
Yeah.
I just, the implementation is so fucked.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah, there's a version of this record. I think what I was hoping for is that there's a version of this record that's both your and my ultimate guilty pleasure record.
Yeah.
And it's not there yet.
It just doesn't stick. Yeah.
It's too much like the things that maybe me more than you even, too much more than like the things that I hate about all these genres. Right? Yeah, okay, so I was hoisted by my own petard on this one.
Well, I'll tell you what. Well, let's listen to, for a break song, let's get back to the roots. Let's talk about something we were getting on Slavland. So, how about we listen to some old school Little Missile and just listen to jet black metal art, the kind of definitive statement. Yeah, so let's fucking listen to that one, take a quick break, and come back with some death metal. All right, so third record of the night, Cranial Contamination, Into the Warp, which I had to make some last-minute swap-outs just because, like, one of the records I chose ended up being mediocre when it was released, and the other one got pushed back. But I'm not going to lie, I chose this specifically because it's Warhammer 40k themed slams. A perfect convergence of our interests. You know?
Yes. Well, you know I like the Warhammer 40k. So I poured myself a very large glass of whiskey, and I'm ready to slam.
So Cranial Contamination is a two-piece from the UK, and they had a session drummer for this one. I think they were doing program drums before, but we've got the string guy, the vocal guy, and the drummer here. And I guess probably the closest comparison would be the Oncology record that we did several episodes back. Less techie, more slam, but in a similar vein of modern, kind of polished, brutal death. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I mean, this is also a UK band, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that for sure. Sort of has OSDM influences in it, has slams. This is more slammy, I get that. Mecha death is the word we've been using. Definitely very modern mecha death. I like the cover. This band
It's a sick cover.
This band faces the problem that a lot of bands do, which is how do you have a cover that clearly evokes 40k without being it?
Yeah.
And because you can't, because Games Workshop is not as cool as they used to be and won't just license it to you for cheap.
Dude, they wouldn't even relicense the cover art for Realms of Chaos.
Dude. That's fucking
they had
lame.
to get a new one made, that is a legally distinct version of Warhammer 40k.
That says it all about why, they've made a lot of questionable decisions over the last few years, and that says that's the loss. I mean, really what says it all is the loss of the original death metal spirit in Warhammer is worse.
Well, and also they're getting fucking destroyed by 3D printing, but that's kind of a lot of people have been kind of pirating the minis and
have they? That's fascinating. The thing that looks like a crocodile, but it's kind of just like a mouth that's attacking. I mean, clearly that can't be an Astartes, so maybe an Astropath or something.
Yeah.
Attacking some guy in a space helmet. I think the weakest link on the cover is the weird dude in the space suit. But this thing is like an energy blob turning into a multi-mouth crocodile. Pretty imaginative.
And you've got the non-space marine getting murdered by some sort of warp demon down there.
No, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
That one.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about the shark thing at the top, right?
No. It's the knockoff thing that looks kind of like a space marine is the worst, I think, thing on there. But the weird shark thing murdering it is just
very good.
Yeah, I like the whale too. Yeah.
So, well, fuck it. Let's just we'll just open up with sample. So, I've got one off Holy Terra. The Golden Emperor would approve, and I think this was actually the lead single for the album, and it makes sense because it's just fucking great. So.
Excuse me, do you mean the God Emperor on the Golden Throne?
Oh, I apologize. You're actually more acquainted with Warhammer 40k lore than I am. So, the God Emperor on the Golden Throne. So let's listen to a bit of Holy Terra. This is such a fun record to listen to.
Damn, I just love that kind of like slam version of a Hellhammer bend at the end.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, they do a thing that me and some of my friends call slamming the slam, where you play the slam in half time after you've introduced it, which is always a great effect. Honestly, the only complaint I have about this part is that big fucking chorus riff, that da 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 da. They should have played that like twice or even 4 times as long and thrown vocals over it to make it a full hook for the song, and then brought it back again at the end, because that's such a great riff. Oh.
Yeah, I thought this part was great too. I almost thought those were like slam versions of Emperor riffs. You know, kind of has that kind of symphonic black metal chord quality to it. Like but all of the actual riffing is, like the note choice has something kind of emperor-y about it, but it's got that grandiose quality to it. You know? Yeah, but it's being everything is being picked in chunky slam blasting. And
well, I kind of like how that hook riff I was talking about is almost like a metalhead listening to Hatebreed and being like, I don't know what hardcore is, but this is pretty cool. Let me do my version of it.
It's that Hatebreed thing was that really was like Hatebreed for sure. That was pretty ignorant. Oh man, the new Hatebreed would also be good for a cringe react. Sadly.
Oh really? Is it bad?
Some other next week maybe. Yeah. It's sad. But so yeah, any other thoughts about the general style there?
Well, I mean, I really like how the opening riff there is kind of a proggy death metal riff, but it lands. And one thing I'll keep coming back to on this record is that unlike most slam bands, even as a slam devotee like myself, this is one of the few cases where the tremolo riffs really stand up to the slams. This does not feel like a record where they're just trying to get to the breakdowns. These tremolo riffs are great, and they remind me, sort of like Oncology, a lot of old school death metal in parts. There's a lot of time and care taken to the sort of structural elegance of this music, where the individual parts, in a vacuum, might not be amazing, but within the context, they're so smooth that kind of gliding from style to style. This is like the definition of craftsman's music, like we've talked about, I think.
Yeah, no, I think the blast parts are really good. Yeah, I really I guess the thing you were calling the proggy riff is the thing that I'm associated with Emperor. Yeah.
I could see that being a sort of play on a death metal version of an Emperor riff, yeah.
Yeah, it's just the general idea. And it's, so the blasting parts are quite good. I guess for my money, I think I liked the blasting parts better, straight up. It's okay. I think there are slams that I can get excited about, but because I'm not a slam guy, I think it's whatever catches me in a slam is a very specific kind of thing. Maybe even more ridiculous slams. Maybe when it gets more abstract, I don't know. But I like the blast parts.
Well, yeah, you're one of those guys where it's you would rather listen to Cephalotripsy than a regular slam band because it's just so out there.
Yeah. So yeah, mine is Shrieks from the Webway, which is presumably about Eldar getting killed. As an Eldar
which
guy,
should always happen.
As an Eldar guy, I'm against this.
Oh my God! Wait, hold on, hold the fuck on. You play Eldar?
Oh, I played High Elves in Fantasy. Obviously I'm an elf guy.
Oh God, Imperial Guard all the way, man.
Cannon fodder.
Exactly.
The Empire is cool. Obviously, Imperial stuff is cool. I mean, most of the 40k factions are pretty cool. The only one that's really lame is Tau, right? But
the Tau are lamer.
Tau suck.
Yeah, the Tau fucking suck. Tyranids.
Tyranids are a little bit cliche.
Well, they weren't originally. They're only cliche now because there's
that's true because
Starcraft, Starship Troopers, all these other guys who have done Space Bugs and shit. They were kind of the originals, you know.
Well, I guess it just means it's from Alien, right? They clearly took the Alien.
Oh yeah.
But but you think Tyranids are cool then?
I think I like Imperial Guard, Tyranids, and like Chaos Demons a lot.
Oh
yeah.
God, that is what you'd like. who's your Imperial Guard regiment?
Oh God, honestly, I don't know the regiments very well because I mostly I haven't played the tabletop game a whole lot. I mostly played Dawn of War, the computer version. Yeah, so I played Imperial Guard and Space Marines and occasionally Orcs there.
Do you have a favorite Chaos God?
Oh,
you're probably Slanesh.
I was about to say I'm a Slam guy and a Gorgron guy. Of course, it's fucking Slanesh, bitch. All right, let's listen to Shrieks. We can't talk about 40K the whole time, so that'll be a bonus episode. Let's listen to Shrieks from the Webway. So you're kind of into. It's interesting as I've been kind of like exposing you to more like brutal death stuff. You seem to actually enjoy a lot of the kind of like techie proggy stuff in a lot of this.
I guess so, yeah. Which, God, I wouldn't have back in the day, right? But like, I guess I don't even hear them as. I guess because I've developed my ear for more death metal-y stuff and just more fancy stuff. I guess I hear that just as like a cool death metal riff.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, the definition of tech death varies over time.
Yeah, I guess it's like the psychroptic tech death I like a lot, I think. Yeah.
I mean, that last riff could have been kind of psychroptic, I think.
Yeah, no, the last... I was going to say, didn't even notice it the first time. That last slow riff was really cool.
Yeah, that could have been off that Sickening Horror record we talked about.
Yeah, and the stuff leading into it, I think the beginning of that has that kind of fast, rapid, shrieking riffing that I like in Concrete Winds.
Yeah.
And also... But the middle of that had this really big, I guess you would call it kind of proggy, techie death metal hook riff, right?
Yeah,
the thing that was a tremolo and a slowdown. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. That's up there with Holy Terra in terms of good hook stuff on this record for me.
There's a lot of... They're very good at making like kind of more real songs out of these ingredients than a lot of these bands. Songs that are actually memorable, with a lot of slam records or even just like kind of brutal death records, it's hard to, they're just kind of like square waves, I might love them, but it'd be very hard for me to tell you what's a great song. Here, it's very easy. These songs have identity.
I think we agreed on all the best ones. I mean, like Holy Terra and Tomb Worlds, which is your next one, are really good.
Oh yeah, Tomb Worlds. We got our Necron song. I wonder, do they have like songs about like every major faction in 40K or something? Because after Tomb Worlds is Hive Mind, which has to be a a Tyrannid song.
Maybe it's about... I mean, one would imagine this is written from a chaos perspective.
It is Into the Warp, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, maybe chaos... I mean, I think I can only condone the anti-Eldar sentiment based on the fact that the Eldar are the least slammy faction.
Well,
there
is
absolutely nothing slam about the Eldar.
They need to do a Warhammer Fantasy or, I guess, Age of Signar side project. You know, that's maybe like
Dude,
a pagan black metal thing.
No, I've wanted to do that for a while. Yeah, elf metal. There actually is a band called Vanyar on Legion Blotan.
Yeah.
I think it was a waste of a good concept. I have to go back and listen to it, but I think it just sounds like other Legion Blotan raw black stuff. But the idea of doing doing sort of aggressive black metal with an elf theme is a very good idea. And if you could do that as 40k elves,
Yeah.
that would be like some sort of weird morbid angel war metal kind of thing.
Well, you could also listen to like Nazgul from Italy.
Oh, you know what? I think I'd never heard Nazgul.
Nazgul are fucking cool, man. Yeah.
My bro Eric, who just donated on the Patreon and talked to you in the forum, actually showed me Nazgul.
Oh yeah. That first record was notorious for its vocals, like those like train whistle hyper high pitched screeches.
Yeah.
It was so cool. So anyway, Tomb Worlds. Let's get on some Necron shit real quick.
Yes.
So this is really good because this kind of shows off the really cool, like, old school death metal tremolo riffs on this. So let's give that a shot real quick. Man, it's like great old school death metal riff, great slam, great old school death metal riff, great slam. You know, we just go back and forth between the two. It's so, oh man. And what's really impressive is that they managed to weave them together. A lot of slam bands have difficulty with the transitions. These feel very natural. They feel necessary for the songs, I think.
Yeah, I think I would be hard pressed to identify anything about Tomb World that was like the good part. But yeah, it's clearly one of the best songs.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I really enjoyed that one. And yeah, it's good sort of, if I listen to more death metal and slam, I'd be able to say more nuanced things about them, but they're good, simple riffs done well.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think one of the standouts is really that second tremolo riff, which, while we were playing, I was saying, that could almost be like a fucking grave riff, man. Mm-hmm. That could be like a Stockholm tremolo riff.
That was brutal as shit. Yeah, well, not, yeah. Grave were not from Stockholm. Yeah, so
I always forget. Yeah.
That's, yes, the sort of, caveman Swedish death metal.
Oh, yeah. Which is interesting because you don't really detect any sort of, I mean, you get a little bit of the hate-breed, but you don't get any of that hardcore influence that you kind of associate with this stuff, I don't think.
No, it's just, yeah, well, a lot of the Grave riffing, Grave sounds like a hardcore band most of the time.
Yeah.
But they have this whole way of, like, super down-tuned, as I was saying during the break, it's really just kind of like, alright, find the low string, play them very fast. You're sort of grinding extremely low and heavy riffs being played any faster, way faster than they have a right to.
Yeah,
right?
well, in addition, I mean, that Grave riff could also be sort of like a corruption of a bolt thrower riff, which makes perfect sense. Because I think it's subtle, but I think there's a couple bolt thrower tributes on this. Like, there's a couple kind of quoting riffs on this.
Point,
yeah,
because they don't really try to sound like bolt thrower at all, right?
No. I think there's certain phrases and stuff, though, that are pulled from bolt thrower, which is more than acceptable. It's necessary if you're going to do a 40K themed death metal band, I think. So, what's your last one that you got?
Let's see. We've got, so I thought this had some interesting stuff on it. This is from Elimination Eradication, which is the last track, and this picks up on little notes of things I've heard throughout this record, and has them in concentrated form here. So let's go to this.
All right.
For a hybrid riff.
Are you talking about the little, like, arpeggiated one?
You
know, I was actually surprised that you chose that one, because that riff, that arpeggiated one, is one of the only things on the record that I think is kind of a misstep. I'm not really into that one.
Because it's not slam?
No, not necessarily. It reminds me of kind of a lot of, like, modern deathcore riffs where they do this kind of, like, heavy part and then, like, you've probably heard a similar thing in a lot of, like, modern hardcore bands. You, like, half heavy and then half kind of, like, ethereal high part. You know, it's just not, like, a motif that I'm really into. I mean, it hardly impacts the album as a whole, but that one stuck out to me as, like, one of the only missteps on the record.
Oh, I think that's one of the best riffs. I mean,
really?
Not because it's a 3-part riff. It's not just the because that on its own, I mean, I like riffs like that, but I can see why you wouldn't.
Yeah.
But then it continues into, like, kind of, all I could say is, like, incantation-y OSDM riffing with tremblast, and then drops back into the jung. I liked hearing that kind of chording in a slam record, because normally you don't get chording at all.
Well, you to be fair, you don't get chording at all in the slam records I bring you. You know what I mean? I mean, there's more dynamic stuff out there. I would say that this band is a little bit out of the wheelhouse of the slam stuff that I generally listen to, which is, my philosophy with slam is I like it like raw and sloppy and kind of disgusting. This is very polished music. Much more than I usually enjoy. Now, I do like it a lot, but I think that if you're into this, then there's probably a lot of kind of popular stuff out right now that you'd probably enjoy a lot.
Yeah, I think I like this pretty well. I don't think, as far as the mecha death stuff you've brought, I think far and away my favorite is still Induced.
Yeah. Well, I don't, you see, when you talk about mecha death, I think of it as very, like, dark and like kind of cruel. This is not that. This is a fun record. This is a party record. 100%.
Not at all. Yeah. So that's but it's very mechanized, right? It's very
yeah. I get what you mean.
So that's kind of what I was going to say about slam in general. So as far like Induced Corporeal, if you haven't heard that, we talked about that a number.
Such a
of
good
episodes
fucking
now.
record.
But
It's so good.
We both really loved that one, and that's basically things from brutal death and slam being driven so far they basically become war metal also, or converge with it. Very abstract too. So we've talked on the show before too how like it's cool that slam is kind of one of the only places in metal that has not been contaminated by sort of for lack of a better word, hipster interlopers.
Yeah.
And that's good. And part of the reason it's been able to preserve its weirdness is its complete devotion to this very quote-unquote uncool aesthetic and this focus on, sort of off vocals that will be off-putting even for people who are used to harsh vocals on crust albums. And, things like that, right? And this kind of bro attitude, which is good. Bro attitude, good. But like, it also feels like as I've been listening to more and more of these, I get a sense that there are a lot of really good, crazy, out there musical ideas on these records. And there's a lot more going on riffing wise than in most your average death metal-y slam record like this, which you might call. Would you call this a slamming death metal record?
There's basically at least one or two slams per song. I think it's safe to call it a slam record. Is
this like Eastern slam?
This is no, I'd say this is pretty. This has a little deathcore touch to it. This is kind of descended from like a band like Ingested. I don't know if you've ever heard them. Ingested are one of the very successful bands to fuse deathcore with slam, and these guys have a less of the obvious deathcore influence, but clearly they're kind of coming from that polished sound, more refined than most slam stuff. So, but yeah, it's a slam record. Yeah.
Yeah. So with interesting musical ideas, but it kind of exists in this self-created stylistic ghetto, right?
Yeah.
And it has the walls up around it and whatever. And I can see how that's been healthy because it's allowed this sort of genre to sort of thrive and mutate for
it's got
10
its
years.
walled garden thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But I would like this music, say just this record in particular, but I think a lot of similar records that you've showed me, I'd like a lot of this so much better. And I hate caring about production, but if the production were slightly different, a bit more organic, or organic isn't necessarily the right word, because you could hardly call induced organic sounding, right?
Yeah.
But a little bit less. I tried to think of a good image for this. I think what I got is like a little less Michael Bay's Transformers, and a little more Warhammer 40K. In terms of the sound.
You just want a little grittier. Yeah.
Yeah, some grit while keeping the cold, inhuman quality of it.
I gotcha.
Or more like Godflesh in it. That skronky riff at the end is kind of nods in the direction of things like Godflesh or Ulcerate any number of things that would actually be complementary to these aesthetics. And so I'd love to hear slam, if a slam band reached more toward the kind of rough sound you'd get on a war metal record or certain kinds of OSDM, but still in this kind of cold, industrial, slammy way, I think their record would be regarded as a technological innovation by regular extreme metal people who aren't familiar with slam. You know what I mean? It would come out of left field and it would be on year-end lists.
I get where you're coming from, and not to be dismissive, but the reality is I think that... Oh, Jesus.
Okay, to be dismissive.
Well, let me know if I have to edit this sentence out. Those bands exist, but the problem is all their songs are about rape, so no one wants to fucking promote them. You know what I mean? Like,
how do you mean? Interesting.
Because there's these bands in slam who are so left field and so weird and are developing, or at least developed, ideas that are so musically so bizarre that they should be incorporated. But the problem is there are bands like Artery Eruption who do albums like Driving My Fist Through Her Chest or Reduced to a Limbless Sex Slave. And you'd be you'd be surprised how much that aesthetic puts people off.
We've never made any money on YouTube ads, and we will continue to not make money on YouTube ads.
Well, for instance, like a good example that you have listened to, the Cephalotripsy record. Great record, fascinating, musically way beyond most of slam in the way it kind of sprawls and spiders out through this this just bizarre network of slam riffs. But it's called Uterovaginal Insertion of Extirpated Anomalies, and it has a limbless pregnant woman who's dead on the cover. So, you know...
that's definitely... So, yeah, that's definitely in the very short list of things that can no longer be... that still cannot be commercialized.
Yeah, so I think there is a lot of, like, crazy shit happening, but it's so out there, and it's...
No, I guess I agree that there's crazy shit. What I'm saying is... that's in the self-created ghetto of slam still, I think. Very much so. I'm saying, if you took something like... I'm almost saying, if you took something like this, or like, you know, what was the brutal death metal band again? The one that... Oncology, or whatever, right? Took something like this, or Oncology, and gave it a rougher sound... and maybe, changed the imagery a little bit so there's less, less
of all
stuff.
of that.
Yes, and made it just more metal in the imagery. I think it would be pretty... I think the uniqueness of it would be apparent to more people, and I think I'd enjoy listening to it more. And it would be... So I'm not telling them to... I'm not saying sell out and become not slam.
Yeah.
The point is, you could make something... There's a niche available for somebody that makes something that crosses from the slam mecha-death world back into the world of heavy atmospheric black and death metal.
I was going to say, you're talking about how do we bridge all the advancements in this niche back into the bulk of death metal?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Slam has made a bunch of technological innovations, and if these riffs were brought back into the main of death and black metal, it would be like returning from the warp with strange technology.
I mean, honestly, I'll admit my bias here. I really think a lot of it is a matter of mainstream death metal, so to speak, getting less infatuated with mindless repetition of old school scenes.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I think that's a huge problem, but I think it's the slam people will have to make the first move because the mainstream death people won't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's fair. Because honestly...
The slam people have to make their move back into death metal and black metal, back into extreme metal as such, before the guys who are into Sanguisugabog get it.
Yeah, no, I get it. And, and there's been advancements like the band I referenced before, Ingested, were actually really important because they brought, in a very direct way, the slam sound to these kids who were just listening to deathcore. And really...
Bring them the slams.
Really
Bring the slams to these youth. Go, and Christ said, go among them and bring to them the slams of uterovaginal insertion.
No, well, fuck, I forgot. I saw it on Facebook or something, but it was like I think it was like some UK guy said, like, if you don't listen to Slam, your granddad was probably a war deserter, which is fucking sick. But yeah, a band like Ingested, you know, they brought the idea of these slam riffs to these deathcore kids who took that technology and created a whole new avenue, this sort of slamming deathcore idea, which sounds, you know, like a very easy, dumb idea, but is surprisingly fucking difficult to manage and make good songs with, actually. And, but that's still kind of in its own deathcore slam ghetto. You know, when we were talking about embryectomy, I talked about the greater beatdown scene or whatever, you know? Like,
Yes.
But no, I get what you're talking about. It's like, how do we bring this back into the fold and expand with it? And that's, I mean, I think albums like this that kind of fold in old school death metal might be part of that.
Yeah, maybe it's part of the process. But yeah, if these guys record another one, I'd love to hear them record another one with production that sounds like Realms of Chaos. Except louder.
Definitely louder. Always louder. All right. All right, so that's good. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back with our last record of the night.
Hi, this is Taylor from Crushing the Scepter, and you're listening to Terminus Podcast.
All right, back with the last record of the night, the I guess questionably named Forgotten Tomb from Chile, with a record called Death is Just Another Path. And obviously I was intrigued. Well, it's just like, oh, fuck, I need another record for this episode. Forgotten Tomb did another one? Oh, we've got another band. And I was intrigued, and I checked it out, and 30 seconds into a song, I was like, oh, there we go. This is the real shit right here. So...
And it takes a lot for you to like something that is kind of very old school raw death metal, right?
Yeah, but just because I think it's played out. There's so many people doing it, and they rarely, like, land on it, but this record lands on the mark in a way that almost none of the others do. Like, it sounds truly late 80s in a way that most of these kind of pretenders don't.
Yeah, well, a lot of that proto stuff is... relative to the post-92 stuff, the late 80s stuff sounds eccentric because it hasn't been turned into a style yet, a formula. And this sounds eccentric. This sounds like death metal before it had been formalized.
Yeah,
You know?
and I think part of that comes to... we've talked a little bit about the mechanics of one-man projects, and this is a guy, he goes by, for this band at least, D Morbid, of course, and he's in a bunch of other Chilean bands, but he's primarily a drummer in those. So I think we talked a little bit about the idea of like a one-man band by a guy who's a drummer first tends to produce kind of interesting results, and I think that's definitely a case here, because this is... You know, a lot of one-man projects done by guys who are guitarists first tend to be riff slideshows. When you get drummers, you tend to get something kind of more holistic in a way. Because while this record has outstanding death metal riffs, there tends to only really be one or two, maybe three per song. And it's more about an overall atmosphere, which is where it kind of gets interesting. Because the atmosphere cultivated on this record, one, is awesome, and two, is clearly informed by the advancements of extreme metal over the past, 20 years or so. but it still sounds like it could have come from 88. And that's what's so interesting to me. It's not mindless worship of those records. It's incorporating newer stuff into that primitive style.
And I think this is something that black metal bands have done a fair amount of in the last 5 years, maybe, and death metal bands have not done so well. Sort of making things that sound extremely old school and vintage that nevertheless are different enough from the old school stuff not to be worship and show some influence by newer things, right?
Yeah.
I think that's something black metal people have done fairly well recently, and it's cool to hear a death metal example of it.
Yeah. So, with that said, let me just get into the first sample. We're just going to listen to a whole song. I think it's actually the shortest song on the record. It's one called Now That I'm Ashes, and this will give you a good sense of what the at least the faster stuff on this record sounds like. So let's give that a try.
That was exciting.
It's so fucking good.
I
This
like
is I'm gonna get into that riff. So I think this is immediately my favorite, old school death metal record of the year so far. This is.
Yep.
Oh yeah, this is so far beyond anyone else kind of pretending to the throne. This just understands that style of music so well. It understands the punk influence. It understands the Celtic frost. It understands all the constituent parts of old school death metal. Because if you're trying to replicate old school death metal and you don't understand those constituent parts, you're not going to get the real thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, just what we heard there is there's only 3 riffs. Main riff is basically a dismember riff, that da 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 da. That could be off like an ever-flowing stream. But what's really interesting is that slide riff you were talking about at the end, that little da 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 da. Because what that is the one of the bridge riffs on Cryptopsy's Benedictine Convulsions. Boom, boom, boom,
it literally is that.
Bow, boom, 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 bow. Yeah, it's missing the slap bass. It's replacing the slap bass with a slide up, but it's basically the same fucking thing. And that's actually something that pops up a lot here. There's a lot of stuff that sounds like it could be off the first couple Cryptopsy albums, but inserted into a context where it sounds totally natural within this 1988 feel that he's cultivating.
Right, and we've talked before about how Cryptopsy is, although it's often a thing that I didn't realize, is that Cryptopsy is a later band than the early ones, right? And that it's kind of certainly very ahead of its time, but that was like 96 or something, right?
Yeah, None Survival was 96, and Blasphemy Made Flesh, the first one, I think was 94.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, no, I hear all that. I mean, obviously the Cryptopsy thing is also just a D-beat riff, right? But it's it's played at a speed and with it's played with a certain kind of speed and ferocity that most D-beat bands don't match, and that certainly Cryptopsy is very good at. So I think I hear what you mean there. The slidey quality is leaning into the slide quality between the chords is something that a lot of hardcore bands almost don't have the time to do. Because if you're a faster guitarist, then you have the time to do cool, embellished things like that. Yeah, so I would say we go to your next sample, and then I've got two that work kind of in a row.
Okay, definitely. One last thing I want to touch on. The production for this record is amazing. It is perfect. It sounds like it was recorded on a 4-track. Every instrument is represented, but it has that, like, over-distorted, like, clipping quality that is so great. It sounds like... It doesn't sound like an old-school death metal record. It sounds like an old-school death metal demo, which is fucking awesome.
That sounds right, yeah.
And there's also a ton of, like, Necrovore and Deathstrike kind of ideas all over this thing. And Master.
I hear the Deathstrike in that riff. I mean, in sort of... as far as extremely brutal D-beat riffing, a band like Deathstrike or Master would have been there before the D-beat bands of the 90s, like early Dysphere, did that.
Yeah.
At all.
So for the next sample, I'll go one track earlier. We've got one called Emptier Than the Void. We're just going to go with the opening off that one. Let's try that out.
That's cool. I like all those riffs.
It's so fucking sick.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Well, it's interesting because, like...
I like the ringing, I really like the ringing guitar tone there, without being reverbed out. It's not got a cavern core thing, right? It's just a sort of ringing...
Yeah, he's just kind of like kind of softly, like, bending or trilling those upper chords, you know? Mm-hmm. It's, like, there's a lot of Slayer in there. Like,
oh, for sure.
That could definitely be, like, that main riff could be off Seasons in the Abyss with no problem.
A Seasons riff, yeah.
Yeah. But with the overall atmosphere, especially with how it goes to that slower riff, it could also almost be like a Turnus or something. You know, one of those kind of, like, cryptic early Black Death bands from the Nordic scene.
Oh, maybe the second Aternus record.
Yeah, yeah.
The sound quality I can hear being like the Aternus demo. But the second Aternus record has more typical death metal-y riff riffing on it.
Yeah,
the second one. I hear that. Well, it's very, there's kind of a fantasy vibe to it. I really hear in your notes you say a smart thing, which I could read or you could read, but...
Well, I don't know which note you're looking at.
Well, I thought you might have it in mind. There's an alternate universe version of Hellhammer that sounds kind of like this.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely true, except, it has the resonant harmonic kind of fantasy quality of second wave stuff, but it's droning and minimal and sort of punishing in a very Hellhammer Triumph of Death kind of way. I think the only reason Hellhammer couldn't have written it is because it's so Slayer.
Yeah,
that is it's important to remember that Hellhammer is pre-Slayer, at least, or before, certainly long before Rain and Blood, right? And Hellhammer influenced Slayer, obviously, to go more brutal, I think. That's gotta be true. But, Hellhammer and Frost are attempting to invent a certain kind of vocabulary that somebody like Slayer then comes along and formalizes.
Yeah.
And there's a certain kind of, our idea in extreme metal of, the standard evil-sounding riff.
Mm-hmm.
Or just the standard kind of dark, dissonant melodic minor riffing. That's, from Slayer, from Rain and Blood, right?
Yeah.
And Hellhammer and Celtic Frost were on their way to figuring it out, but they weren't quite there yet. And this uses that technique in a really Hellhammer way. So that's one of your back-in-time effects, I think. Yeah, no, there's a lot of this record, which is... I think there was another band I was talking about on the show that was like this. It has that unstuck-in-time quality. I think it might have been on the bonus episode when we were talking about Impaled Nazarene. It feels like it could have been now or it could have been 30 years ago. But I think that's what makes this music so exciting is the way these songs are structured, this hypnotic way they're constructed. Like I said, most of these songs just have 2 riffs. So I guess what I'm saying is, it's fascinating how it's approximating kind of the atmosphere and the gestures of old school death metal, but there's also a sense that there's no way it could have been made back then because there's a clear idea of what's happening here, of how to construct these songs. These are not, it's a one-man project, so they're not ripped out in a garage. They're constructed very deliberately. Yeah, so, I think as far as my samples, I've got a couple ideas of, I really liked this as well. And I think what I want to lead in with is, let's just bridge from the Hellhammer Frost thing to being here's a example of this guy being very influenced by those bands, but writing songs in a more coherent way, because he has the advantage of hindsight.
Yeah.
So let's go into The Eyes of the Strange One, just sort of the middle of the song till the end.
All right, let's try it. Bro, I love the way that it's like the tape clicking off at the end of that. That's so goddamn good.
That's raw. Okay, so the first thought about this is about that very kind of hardcore punky riff at the beginning of it. Which was like really well done. I hadn't heard anything that really grabbed me about this record until I got to that point, and then obviously that's like me bait. But like, so that riff is, I'm pretty sure, just da da 1 1 1 4 4 da da da, yeah, 1 1 1 4 4 4 1 1 1 4 4 4 5. You know, it's like it's basically like a 1 4 5, but with an octave difference on the top chord, so that the 5 is way lower down. And so this is like rock and roll chord writing, right?
Yeah.
Over D beats. And so it's consistent with your alternate universe Hellhammer thing, because it's like in the early Hellhammer, or even the very early Celtic Frost, you get songs like Into the Crypt of Rays, right? Which have these kinds of major key rock and rollisms left over in them. And kind of awkward things that were kind of like chord changes and blues ideas. And it's like, oh, get that out of here. But what it creates...
Excuse me, Into the Crypt of Rays fucking rules.
yeah, but you know what I mean.
I get it.
That might not even be the best example of it. But it creates these moments of these vestigial rockisms as they're trying to make black and death metal. Inadvertently create this really weird dissonance, because you get these kinds of dark, just crushing, ultra dissonant discharge style riffs, and then these kinds of major key bouncy punk rock riffs. Or Motorhead riffs. And it accidentally creates this eerie dissonance, and that kind of and then that gets deliberately used. Major key dissonance gets used by Possessed on Seven Churches or Morbid Angel, or Cryptopsy, to create this kind of eerie, ultra dissonant vibe. Does that make sense to you?
No, I never. You're correct, and I never really realized that about Cryptopsy until you kind of brought it up. The idea of like, oh, some of these riffs are kind of like weirdly happy when we were listening to None So Vile for the first Terminus Prime, and I was like, oh yeah, you're right. These are like weirdly like perky riffs, but they're in such like a gross, weird context.
Yeah.
that they're somehow like given this sinister quality.
Oh, for sure. For sure, the recontextualization makes them perverse. And the way it works with your ears, because you've just heard all of this extremely half-step minor scale stuff around it, and then you shift to the major, and that's just another dissonant move.
Yeah. It's like meta dissonant, you know? It's structurally dissonant.
Yes, and I think that's something that's really come of age now in death metal, and also in a different way in black metal. So this is a good example of an 80s version of that, like a hypothetical missing link between Hellhammer and real death metal.
Like, honestly, this guy really needs to do like a split with Drogkar, you know?
Oh, that would be sick.
That would work perfectly.
We should hook that up. We should do a Terminus comp. You know?
I'll reveal myself for a moment just to say I have already sent this album to a couple friends with labels to encourage them to pick this up and try to get it some real distribution outside of South America.
Awesome. So, the other thing was that fucking solo. You had something to say about how it was recorded.
Okay, so most of the time when you're doing solos in modern metal, you have your two guitar tracks on either side, and you'll just dub the solo on top on a third track. That's not what he fucking does here.
He'll mix it to center.
Yeah, you'll just mix it to center. Here, he does it like they did on an old school death metal demo, which is one of the guitar lines has to break into the solo. So the solo is only in the fucking left channel.
And that makes it sound live.
Which makes it sound live, and it makes it sound energetic, and it represents a commitment to this whole idea of traditional death metal, like, demo shit. You wouldn't catch one of the retro old-school death metal bands dead doing that, because, well, that's not the right way to mix it, you know? This guy fucking did it, and as a result, it sounds cooler and more extreme than anything those guys are doing, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and it sounds good. I mean, it sounds more alive from that.
And also, it leaves room for the ear to hear the rhythm guitar.
Yeah, it's like
Right.
he's a one-man project who's trying to make this sound like it's a rehearsal tape for a band. Like
And because the
if you didn't know, you would think this was a whole band, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think rehearsal tape is a good... I think in terms of getting beyond fetishistically raw production to actually good-sounding raw music,
Yeah.
I think rehearsal tape is a good guide. Mm-hmm. Let's think less about recording raw full length and more about just recording all your music as if it's a rehearsal tape.
Yeah. No, that's a good guideline.
Yeah, this is, and of course you can record a rehearsal tape in all sorts of nice ways, and it will still sound like a rehearsal tape. So, yeah, I mean, what I really liked about this part, aside from the sick wailing guitar solo, is the rhythm parts under it, which has this sort of, mountainous, pentatonic, almost bluesy thing, and then it just morphs into these big, thick chords. And you heard it as we were listening to it. This sounds like a thing I've always wanted to hear, which is black and death metal bands listening to High on Fire.
Yeah. Well, you bring High on Fire a lot on this show, which means I really need to revisit them.
I think it's over the last couple of weeks. I went back and listened to Blessed Black Wings again, which I remember listening to. I listened to a few songs on that when I was in high school and liked them, but it was also so dissonant that I didn't quite know what to do with it then.
Yeah.
And then I got Death is This Communion a little bit later when I was like 18 or 19, and I just listened to the shit out of that, and that's still one of my go-to bar records. Mm-hmm. And High on Fire has been misunderstood, at least at their peak, maybe between Surrounded by Thieves and Death is This Communion, those three. They were marketed as a sludge band because that was a thing that was happening back then. Mm-hmm. And because he'd been in Sleep, and because the first thing that broke metal with punk scene people and hipsters was, other than the small number of them who'd always been listening to it, was sludge, right?
Yeah.
It was like a lot of people in like, people were like, oh, this music doesn't sound as threatening. It's like slow. The fast stuff with the screaming is so scary, but this is slow. But High on Fire wasn't slow. They played at sort of punishing mid-tempos or pretty fast. Especially their best songs. And what they were was one of the very few bands that's made music completely rooted in pre-88 black death metal that sounded modern. I mean, the sludge thing is totally there in some of the riffs and some of the slower riffs, but like what Matt Pike was doing then was this kinds of like Hellhammer, Possessed, Death Strike, Devolution by High on Fire is like a Death Strike or Master song. He's drawing on all of these things and possibly also Immortal.
Huh.
I know I compared Abbott to Matt Pike on the last show, and then I thought about the chronology. And the chronology is right for Matt Pike to have been listening to Immortal.
I got you.
So, just these big, sort of epic Conan the Barbarian riffs is what he adds into the 80s stuff. And you could totally hear that in the rhythm part. And I actually found another part later in this. So, I'm not claiming this guy may not listen to High on Fire at all. But it's a really interesting parallel evolution of you can get the best parts of High on Fire from just listening to Hellhammer and Celtic Frost. So this comes from...
I want you... Oh, you gotta say this, like, in a serious metal voice, because holy shit, this title, dude.
Yes, Alright. Alright, get ready.
Yep.
I claim the worst punishments for my existence.
Holy shit. Dude, that title is like, oof. Wouldn't that be the ultimate, like, DSBM song title?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, or also just, like, imagine some really lifting-oriented beatdown.
Yeah, I could see that. Definitely.
Yeah.
I love how...
So this...
The best powerlifting beatdown stuff is the most negative.
Yeah. So this is like from about back end of the song till the end.
All right, let's give it a shot.
You hear the death strike on that last riff?
Oh, yeah. Just that...
It's just
Well, it's also discharge, you know?
Oh, well, for sure. I mean, Death Strike was super dischargy. It's, you know, the crust band. The irony is that, like, with some important exceptions, the irony is, like, I think as many death metal bands, there are very few crust bands that really capture what's great about discharge. And there are equally many, if not more, extreme metal bands. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's
Like-
I honestly, I think there's an argument to be made that extreme metal carried discharge forward more than crust punk
Yeah,
did.
I think I'd agree. I mean, like, if you think about nothing from the rest of the 80s I can think of sounded as brutal as Discharge until maybe, I think even Bastard was recorded in the 90s. Nothing sounded as brutal as Discharge for the rest of the 80s, but Death Strike did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pay to die a half step lower.
Well, it's also like, what's interesting is just like, there's so many formative ideas right there. Like, there was a riff that was in there, that like really ugly tremolo riff, and I was like, holy shit, that could be like from Havohaze Dethrone the Son of God. But it sounds perfectly integrated within the rest of this, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I wanted to draw attention to was just in that last sort of loping D-beat riff, there was this, the chiming chord over it.
Yeah, which is again kind of a cryptopsy idea, which is interesting.
Oh, I guess I hear that, yeah. Also just, the idea of integrating second wavy chording with really primitive stuff is something that High on Fire does a lot.
Yeah.
And it's never like a hanging chord like that. But it's a kind of a similar thing. Also, the last thing is just, as far as atmospheric chordy parts, which there were some of at the beginning of that sample too, you know?
Yeah.
Some of the clanging, glistening guitars. This is another good example of the back in time thing. So now we associate that with second wave forward, right? Sort of mayhem, but also now like DSO or ulcerate or Merge or whatever, right? Back in the day, if you were writing this in 1988, where you'd get it is from Christian Death and Bauhaus.
Yeah. Kind of getting back into that whole like goth or post-punk idea. You talk about like, being very influential, the kind of chording on this stuff.
Yeah, and like nobody did that on... I mean, nobody did that. Everyone was influenced by the Killing Joke, but nobody took chords like that into extreme metal until Euronymous, as far as I know. But like, this is like, what if someone was doing that before Euronymous? It's, I guess there's a bit of it on Seven Churches, right?
I mean, Seven Churches has a lot of just like bizarre kind of musical shapes on it. But I would say, I was just talking to a buddy of mine about Seven Churches the other day, and I basically said, Seven Churches is cool, but if you've heard Altars of Madness, you've heard the concluded version of it.
I know, I get what you mean. I haven't listened to it in, God, more than 10 years at this point. It's just, I remember listening to it and being like, oh, this is pretty cool. That also has a lot of residual rockisms in it that hold it back, I think.
Altars?
No, the other one. Fucking
Seven Churches.
Yeah, Seven Churches. Yeah.
Residual thrashisms. I still like that album a lot, but it's like, it's definitely kind of in spite of itself. It's a clumsy attempt at something further.
It's got things that sound like mayhem riffs way before their time, but it doesn't really have the gothy thing per se. It's all kind of trend.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Burning in Hell is still the sickest thing ever.
This is one of those records that I think we both equally like. Although it's really a kind of thing you've been waiting for.
Yeah, I honestly, I said in my notes, like, this is the real articulation of what, like, a band like Siege Column was trying to do. Which is a true representation of late 80s extreme metal. Because obviously, calling it death metal is reductive. It was all primordial at that time. Death and black and thrash all mixed together, but with a real understanding of death metal in particular. And I'm fucking in love with this thing. And I think that if you're listening to the show, you owe it to yourself to go to Cadaverismo. And you know what? Just deal with, like, the language barrier and find a way to order some tapes and patches from those guys. Because those guys are really, like, carrying on the underground in a way that very few people in the Northern Hemisphere are these days.
Yeah. All right. So I think we're about to wrap it up.
Yeah, let's wrap it up. And you know what? I got an outro song.
I got an outro track. You did both of the songs on the last episode.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
You got one this episode. What I want to do is highlight a band that we don't have time to review, I think.
Okay.
Which is, it's just a demo, so we don't have to review it. But once Slavland dropped, I was like, holy shit, I have to review Slavland. But this is a new band, new record by Veriluola, which is out on Bandcamp now. I don't think it has a label yet, so that might also be something we should talk to our friends about. It's an American and Finnish project. I believe the drums are by... all instruments by Santeri, bass, guitar, and drums. Vocals on track, solo on track 1, 3, and lyrics on the second track by Declan. I swear I've heard the name Declan somewhere, so maybe he's in something else, but he's in the U.S., although his name's Irish. But this is, you'll hear that it's, I guess as far as the full spectrum black metal ambition I've been carrying around, this is a very good example of trying to do that from within the Finnish scene, and specifically integrate the two sides of the Finnish scene. We talked about how the Finnish scene is almost split in half. You know, there's like the Baharit Archgoat side, and then the Satanic War Master Horna Sargeist side.
Yeah.
And there's also weird marginal outsider Finn Black on the end. Very beautiful stuff like who are we? Samos Equinox we're gonna review soon. Khors. bands. There's one other that I'm gonna wish I'd remembered. I'm gonna go. Rahu, and the quest for the Vajra of Shadows. But so there's this several different strains of Finn Black, and also Ride for Revenge, obviously. This combines all of them, and sounds like none of them. And I was really impressed by this. I'm gonna, I don't even know which track to pick, so let's just go for, Nuclear Spear. We can't go wrong with
Holy
Nuclear
shit.
Spear.
Oh, man. That sounds like a... Oof. That sounds fucking sick. That sounds like a Dark Moon Warrior song or something.
Yeah.
I'm down.
You ready for this shaft?
Well, let's go out with fucking Nuclear Spear and
7 minutes and 26 seconds of Nuclear Spear.
That's a long explosion. All right.
Yeah.
All right. We'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks so much for listening. You take it easy.
Peace, dudes.